A millionaire invited her black maid son to play chess. As a joke, in front of elite guests, she expected to humiliate him, but what happened next silenced the entire room. The maid's child wasn't just a kid, he was a genius. And in just 34 moves, he didn't just win the game, he changed his life forever. This is the story they never saw coming. And you'll never forget it. He's just a maid's kid. What harm could it do? Those words, tossed into the air with a chuckle and a sip of white wine, would be remembered forever. It was a Saturday afternoon in Charleston, the kind of warm, breezy day that Maid-moneyed people gather in manicured gardens to talk about politics, property, and stock portfolios as if the world outside their gates didn't exist. Eleanor Price, a well-known widow and millionaire, was hosting her annual garden brunch, an event filled with linen suits, cucumber sandwiches, and just enough fake smiles to fuel Charleston's gossip for weeks. Her backyard looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine, white canopies draped in ivy, tables lined with sparkling glassware, and the scent of fresh roses in the air. And somewhere near the edge of that perfection, bent over a silver tray of hors d'oeuvres, was Althea. A black woman in her 40s, she moved with the grace of someone used to being unseen. For 8 years, she'd worked quietly, cleaning Eleanor's estate, caring for her plants, serving her guests. But today she had her 11-year-old son with her, Elijah. She couldn't find a sitter, and Eleanor had reluctantly agreed to let him sit in the corner with a book. Eleanor noticed the boy during her second glass of wine. He was sitting cross-legged by the hydrangea bush, flipping through a worn-out chess strategy guide. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt ironed, but his shoes told the story, cracked solace, too small for his growing feet. Eleanor squinted. "Althea, is that your son?" "Yes, ma'am, that's Elijah." The guests turned to look, some politely, others with thinly veiled amusement. One of them, a stockbroker with a loud laugh, said, "What's he reading? A comic book?" Althea's voice was soft. "A chess book. He loves chess." That's when Eleanor had the idea, or maybe it was a joke. Either way, it came out in a sugary sweet tone. "Well, why don't we have little Elijah play a game with Mr. Grayson?" The guests chuckled. Mr. Grayson, in his crisp blazer and silver watch, was a retired banker and the reigning state chess champion, a man who treated strategy like war and always won. "Oh, Eleanor, that's cruel," someone laughed. But Eleanor waved it off. "Oh, come on, it's just a bit of fun." Althea froze. Her hands gripped the tray tighter. She looked at Elijah, who was now standing, looking confused but curious. She leaned down and whispered, "You don't have to if you don't want to." Elijah glanced at the guests, at the polished chessboard waiting on the patio table, and then back at his mother. "I want to," he said. Eleanor smiled, thinking this would be a delightful little spectacle. But as Elijah approached the table and gently touched the white queen, not even his mother knew just how much the world was about to change in the next 30 minutes. And that's when it all began. Not a joke, but a revelation. The chairs creaked as guests leaned in, some adjusting their sunglasses, others sipping slowly from tall glasses of iced tea. No one was paying attention to the violinist anymore. All eyes were now on the small boy, the son of a maid, sitting across from a man who once played chess in Europe. Against grandmasters, Mr. Grayson had the air of someone who'd never lost control of a room. He adjusted his cufflinks, smiled at Elijah as though entertaining a child, and placed his hand on the timer. "All right, young man," he said, a twinkle of arrogance in his voice. "Let's see what you've got." Elijah nodded politely. He wasn't here to show off. He wasn't even sure what he was walking into. He only knew that chess made him feel in control, something he rarely felt in the world outside books. Grayson opened with an aggressive e4, the classic king's pawn move, a statement. Elijah responded calmly with c5, the Sicilian defense. Grayson's eyebrows lifted slightly. That wasn't a beginner's move. The guests chuckled at first, but the laughter quickly turned into murmurs. Each of Elijah's moves seemed precise, not random, not nervous, calculated. By move 10, Grayson leaned in closer, his smile fading. By move 16, he had stopped sipping his drink. By move 22, a hush had fallen over the table. Eleanor, who had been trying to enjoy her third deviled egg, now sat frozen, glass half raised. "Is he memorizing moves?" someone whispered. "No," another replied. "He's thinking through everyone." Grayson tried a queenside castle, a safe move, a way to reset. But Elijah anticipated it. He countered with a knight sacrifice. That opened Grayson's defense like peeling a lid off a can. Gasps echoed. The violinist had stopped playing altogether. Even the waitstaff peeked over, and then came the moment. Move 34. Elijah reached across the board, placed his bishop with delicate precision, and softly said, "Checkmate." The board went silent. Grayson stared at the pieces, blinked, and ran the moves back in his mind. But there it was. A flawless trap. He looked up, but Elijah wasn't smiling. He was just calm, as if solving a puzzle. As if this was just another. Afternoon, with his old chess book from the thrift store, Mr. Grayson stood up slowly. "How old are you again?" "11, sir." "You're no amateur." Elijah looked over at his mom, who was standing frozen, one hand over her mouth. She didn't know whether to clap, cry, or just breathe. And Eleanor. Her painted smile had cracked just slightly. She gave a slow, forced clap. Well, that was certainly unexpected. But deep down, they all knew. Something bigger had just happened. Not just a boy beating a man, but a story rewriting itself in front of them. The sound of that final word, checkmate, still lingered in the air like thunder that hadn't finished echoing. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Even the clinking of silverware had stopped, as if the garden itself was holding its breath. Elijah leaned back slightly in his chair, unsure what to do next. He wasn't used to attention. He was used to secondhand books, not spotlight. Used to the corners of rooms, not the center of them. Across the table, Mr. Grayson sat frozen. The man who had once crushed opponents in timed matches with 2 moves left to spare was now rubbing his forehead, like he had a headache he couldn't explain. He finally stood, cleared his throat, and extended his hand. "You played a brilliant game, son." Elijah hesitated for just a second, then shook it. "Thank you, sir." Behind them, the guests were no longer chuckling. They were whispering. An elderly woman in pearls leaned over to her husband. "Did you see how calm he was? Like a machine." A young man in a Yale blazer pulled out his phone. "I think I just witnessed history. That kid is a genius." But Elijah wasn't basking in it. He looked over at his mother, his safe place. Althea stood still, her lips parted in shock, one trembling hand pressed against her chest. She hadn't expected this. She always believed her son was smart, yes. She saw how he tore through puzzle books, how he taught himself openings and endgames from the library's computer. But seeing him beat a man like Mr. Grayson in front of a crowd that had laughed at him only moments before, that was different, that was undeniable. One of the guests, a woman with a designer purse and too much perfume, turned to Eleanor. "Where did he learn to play like that?" Eleanor forced a tight smile. "From what I gather, a book his mother got him." The guest raised an eyebrow. "That's remarkable." "You should sponsor him, Eleanor. With your name behind him, he could go national." Eleanor's smile tightened further. This wasn't how she had expected the afternoon to go. This boy, this maid's child, had turned her harmless entertainment into a revelation. And worse, he had done it gracefully. No arrogance, no boasting, just brilliance. And that scared her more than anything. Still, she composed herself, clinking her fork against her glass. "Well, everyone," she said with a brittle cheer, "how about we give a round of applause for young Elijah?" Polite clapping filled the air. But for some, it wasn't just politeness, it was genuine. The kind of applause that says, "I just saw something rare." A millionaire invited her black maid son to play chess and Elijah. He simply stood up, nodded to the crowd, and walked back to his mother, a quiet king in a world that hadn't even known he was on the board. That night, in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Charleston, Elijah sat at the kitchen table, replaying the match in his head. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just studied, flipping through his dog-eared notebook where he wrote down every game he played. Every win, every mistake, every lesson. Althea stood at the stove, pretending to stir dinner, but really just watching her son. Her heart had barely stopped racing since they left Eleanor's estate. She was proud, more proud than she'd ever been, but also nervous. Because she knew how the world worked. And the world didn't always reward boys like Elijah. Especially not boys who made rich people feel small, but sometimes, just sometimes, the world noticed. By morning it had. A local blogger who had been at the party posted a photo of Elijah sitting across from Mr. Grayson, captioned, "Maid's son defeats state chess champ, brilliance has no title." The post exploded. Hundreds of shares, comments flooded in. Words like prodigy, incredible, genius. That same afternoon, the principal of a top-tier private academy called Althea directly. "We saw the video clip. We'd like to offer Elijah a full scholarship, no tuition, no fees. Just bring him in?" Later, a well-known chess coach reached out on social media, offering to train Elijah for national tournaments for free. And then, something even more surprising happened. Mr. Grayson himself showed up at their apartment. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a casual shirt, jeans, and humility. "I've thought about that match," he said. "I've played 1,000 games, and your boy outmaneuvered me with the calm of someone twice his age." Althea offered him a chair. He didn't take it. "I'd like to mentor him if you'll let me," Grayson continued. "He has the mind of a grandmaster. And the world needs to see it." Althea paused. Her instinct was to say no. She had always done things on her own, no handouts, no help. But then she looked at Elijah, quiet, hopeful, already solving an endgame puzzle in the corner of the room. This wasn't about pride. This was about potential. She nodded. "We'll do it. But we do it together. I don't want him to lose who he is in the process." Grayson smiled. "That's exactly why he'll win." And so began Elijah's real journey, not just from public school to private, not just from borrowed books to real training, but from invisible to unstoppable. Because while Eleanor's garden guests had left with full stomachs and empty gossip, Elijah left with something far more powerful, a chance. And sometimes one chance is all it takes to change everything. 1 year later, Elijah stood on a brightly lit stage in Atlanta, Georgia, holding a gold trophy nearly as tall as he was. Around his neck was a medal engraved with 3 words, National Chess Champion. He had just defeated some of the most elite young minds in the country, kids with private tutors, international training, and parents who could afford 10 different coaches. But none of them had Elijah's hunger. None of them had studied on a broken kitchen table under a flickering light bulb. None of them had learned strategy from a secondhand book and a mother who believed in him even when the world didn't. Elijah didn't gloat. When they handed him the mic, he simply said, "I want to thank my mama. She gave me the first chessboard, and the belief that I could win with it." The crowd stood up. It wasn't just applause, it was respect. His photo was soon on the cover of Time Kids magazine. The headline read, "The boy who beat a champion and then became one." He got letters from Harvard, invitations to speak at schools. A scholarship fund was started in his name, the Elijah Initiative, to help underprivileged kids access chess programs in underserved communities. But there was one place he never got invited back to, Eleanor's estate. She never called, never acknowledged him publicly. In her eyes, that garden match was supposed to be a joke, a polite, humiliating little show. But it had backfired. She had unintentionally given a boy from the margins a spotlight, and he had turned it into a legacy. But Elijah never held a grudge. He didn't need to. Because success has a way of speaking louder than revenge. One Saturday, Althea found him in the kitchen teaching a younger kid from the neighborhood how to play. "You gonna rest now, champ?" she asked with a smile. Elijah looked up, grinning. "Mama, I'm just getting started." And he was. Because his story wasn't just about chess. It was about breaking expectations. About rewriting the rules people thought were unchangeable. About proving that brilliance doesn't come from bloodlines or bank accounts. It comes from belief, discipline, and love. Never underestimate someone because of where they come from. Talent, genius, and greatness don't come wearing a price tag. And sometimes they're wearing worn-out sneakers and sitting in the shadows. Sometimes life sets the stage for those who were never meant to be seen, and in that moment, they shine the brightest. If you were inspired by Elijah's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that touch the heart and open the mind.